This is lesson 3-3A, composition of functions along with their domain. I've got two examples. The first example is a review of domain. The second example is finding the composition and the domain. So first thing first, find the domain of each function. These are three of the main domain issues we have. So remember, you cannot divide by 0. It's not that x can't be 0, but the denominator can't be 0. So this could be any real number except 0. For the square root of x, remember, we can't take square roots of negatives. I can take a square root of 0 or a positive. So this, all x greater than or equal to 0. It can be 0 or positive. And this one's kind of confusing to some students. 1 over the square root of x. I can't have the denominator be 0, and I can't have inside the radical be negative. So for this example, x has to be greater than 0. Again, if it were just the square root of x, it would be greater than or equal to 0, but I've also got the denominator issue, so I can't be equal to 0. So it's just a quick review of domain. Now for the composition. I've got f of x is 3 over x, and g of x is 2x minus 7. I want to find the composition f of g of x. So what I do is I do the inside thing first. So all I'm going to do is wherever I see a g of x, replace it with 2x minus 7. So I'll write it as f of 2x minus 7. Then I'm going to go to my f function, and wherever I see an x, I'm just going to replace it with an input box, because one function is getting input into the other. So some students have confusion with that. So I'm going to write my f function as 3 over input box. And what goes inside the input box is this quantity right there. So I'm going to write it as 3 over 2x minus 7. And that's my answer. That is f of g of x, 3 over 2x minus 7. The second part of the problem was to state the domain. I usually do 3 things for this. I'll do it over here. Step 1, I check the inner. Step 2, I check the final. And step 3, I combine them. Okay, so I go to my inner function, which is g of x, and I ask myself, what's the domain of that? There's no division, there's no radicals, it's all real numbers. Then I go to my final composition, and I ask myself, what's the domain of that? There is some division. It's not that x can't be 0, it's the denominator can't be 0. So what I'm going to do is set the denominator equal to 0 and find out who the bad x's are. So 2x minus 7 equals 0, 2x equals 7, x equals 7 halves. So if x were 7 halves, the denominator would be 0, and that would be bad. So my domain is all reals except 7 halves. And then the combo is really going to be the answer to the domain question. What I would do is combine all the bad values from the inner, all the bad values from the final, and combine them. This could be anything real except 7 halves. So it's just going to be anything real except 7 halves. And that is the domain of my composition. So this is how to find composition of functions and their domain.